What it do? Welcome to the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show. TikTok. The countdown is on to the start of the NFL regular season. You might have drafted, you still might have your draft coming up. But what we're going to do today is a round by round rundown. Our favorite players, the values in those rounds, who you should be building your fantasy football teams around. And maybe even if you already drafted, grade your draft and potentially look for players that maybe some of your league mates missed when we get into our late round value picks and sleepers. It is great to be back and wrapping up fantasy football draft season. So excited. If you've had your drafts, how you feeling? What are you looking for? Our big draft with this league coming up on Labor Day. I cannot wait. I'm JJ Buck. We got Steven Masterson, Aaron Hernandez, and we are ready to go. We don't need to mess around with it. People are in it. It's fantasy football season. You're drafting, you're going, and I want to hit the elite players off the bat. Some of them, we don't need to explain a lot. But let's get into it. Round 1 and 2. Round 1, players that you guys want a piece of. Like, you are happy about starting your fantasy draft with. And let's go, Steven. Round 1 names, front, back, side to side. Who do you like?
Well, the player I've been drafting the most of right now is Amon-Ra. I have him ranked as my fourth player off the board. So most of the time, if you're picking in the top 8, he's usually the last player on most people's boards, Yahoo and ESPN. So I'm happy with him. But he's also, if I'm picking 4, he's probably who I'm taking over Bijan and Brees. So for me, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, uh, and Christian McCaffrey, but then it's Amon-Ra for me. And because you can get him at that 8 spot, I love it.
Yeah, 20.7 points per game last season. He's going to be, I think, even better this year. Healthy, a lot of games in Dome Stadium. So the Detroit Lions, we know how beneficial it is to Jared Goff. And I want to get your guys' thoughts too. You mentioned that name, CeeDee Lamb. He just got paid $100 million guaranteed, second highest annual average value per year. But we know with these contracts, it's all about the guaranteed money. I still don't know why the Cowboys wanted to make this a story for so long when they ended up just giving him that money because he's an elite player. He's worth it. But CeeDee Lamb, is he now that we know he's locked in, he's going to have 2 weeks to ramp up before the regular season opener against the Cleveland Browns? I'll throw it to you, Aaron. Are you considering now maybe even CeeDee Lamb as a number 1 overall pick in fantasy drafts versus Christian McCaffrey?
Uh, I would say yes, but then also it's Christian McCaffrey. That's the toughest pick right there. Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, and you can even throw an entire killer. CeeDee Lamb, there's no question for me that he's going to be a stud. So I would I take him first. I don't know, but am I questioning it at all anymore? There's zero doubt for
Yeah,
me.
I think,
So
Steve, you mentioned it. It's you're drafting these players kind of, you get stuck on what they did last year. I don't think either player is going to hit those numbers. But what you're getting is still elite play, like guys that you're expecting that if they're on the field, they're going to finish at worst 5th. Like you're
yep.
expecting top 3 to 5 from both these guys in the number 1 overall conversation.
Well, and the best thing that happened. So I did a few drafts over this last weekend, right? And CeeDee Lamb hadn't signed. I got him in three different drafts at the 9, the 10, and the 12th spot
No
because
way.
everybody was afraid he wasn't going to sign. So I'm stoked. So anybody who drafted this last weekend probably got great value on CD. But so in those leagues, you're probably happy. But I still think he's going to end up being he'll be at least a top 4 at his position. And that's where you're drafting him. But he has the potential to be the wide receiver 1. And you can only say that about a handful of guys.
Yeah, and quickly, round 1 is pretty simple. You're getting elite running back, elite wide receiver. I'm really liking Jamar Chase as a guy that's kind of slipping a little bit. You got to realize, Jamar Chase, he's never finished lower than wide receiver 11 in his career, and that's been with or without Joe Burrow. So we've seen him play without Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow's locked in. And you got to keep your fingers crossed. So I think Jamar Chase being one of those wide receivers that's sliding a little bit in the first round, I love his value because CeeDee Lamb, to your point, Steve, if you're getting ready to draft, he's going right back up those boards. So it's pushing Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson down a little bit, and you have that conversation. I think really those guys, I still might put Justin Jefferson 3 behind it, but we're talking about elite players in the first round. So you shouldn't feel bad at all getting any of these guys. Quickly, second round, I'm going to hit a name that's been kind of controversial with this podcast because one of us is saying, stay away. It's Garrett Wilson. And you're looking at the receivers in the second round because there's going to be a running back run at the end of the first round, into the second round. It's just the way it's playing out across the board. All the information, the ADP that's coming in from all these different sites, there's that run on running backs. And Garrett Wilson is kind of the now or never play. Like if a at least good Aaron Rodgers can't get Garrett Wilson a top 10 finish, and you wonder if it's ever going to happen. And when you look at him compared to the other wide receivers in the second round, you have Puka Nacua, who I think is definitely a safe 4 play, average 17.6 points per game. But if we're expecting a bounce back from Cooper Kupp, then that kind of lowers the elite ceiling on Puka Nacua. And the other wide receiver we're seeing going in that area, it's Davante Adams. And Davante Adams had 5 games last year with 8.5 points or less. Now you hope that Gardner Minshew comes in and he's more consistent, but he had those ridiculous games. He had a couple of games where it was like 40 points, 45 points, which won you weekends, which we talk about all the time. But I wonder, is he still going to be that roller coaster of a quarterback just in that Raiders offense or receiver?
I was like, that's an Aaron question.
I know. I was like, to me, I think there's definitely going to be more consistency. When you look at Minshew with the teams that he's been on, that he's actually put in, few games. DJ Chark, Marvin Jones were a thing. DJ Chark was a Pro Bowler with Minshew. You have, Colts with Pittman and Downs looking pretty solid under him. So it's like, I do expect consistency, more so than Aiden O'Connell, definitely. But, I'm the Minshew lover boy, so.
So I think it's important. So I am the Garrett Wilson hater. Like, it's just what I am, right? But the reason I do that is we keep projecting Garrett Wilson to perform as a top 5 wide receiver. That's what he's being drafted as. That's what we think he's going to be. If you did that last season, your team probably hit the floor a little bit. We're doing it again. But there's players that are going behind him who have performed and proven to us they can perform at that level. And we keep expecting Garrett Wilson to do it. Sorry. So, even players like Nico Collins, which we can say, okay, they brought in Stephon Diggs, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk, we'll see. But there's players that are going later than him that have performed better than him, including Puka in his rookie season. And we keep projecting Garrett Wilson to go. Okay, and that's my only complaint with him.
If Aaron Rodgers is on the field, he's just good, right? He's if he just plays good football, elite target share, elite air yards percentage. At what point do you bank on talent? Do you think Garrett Wilson is talented?
I do. I do, but I just feel
he should have at that point in time, I still want to draft his ceiling.
I get you.
Versus Puka, because if everyone loves Cooper Kupp and thinks he's going to eat into his share, I think that's where I think it's a very interesting conversation at that point.
I like Garrett Wilson later, but he's getting pushed up to that 10, 11, 12 spot. I'm fine if Garrett Wilson went late round 2, but if I have to draft him early round 2, I'm not as interested. We're banking on a few things, right? We're banking on, elite target share. We're banking on a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury to be elite still.
He doesn't have to be elite.
He has to be decent.
Better than Zach Wilson.
You're not wrong there.
Zach Wilson's not elite.
He made the Denver Broncos roster.
I was going to say, that's why I was watching him.
But we're also projecting Breece Hall to be a first-round talent as well, right? So they're one of the few offenses that haven't performed at this elite level, and we're drafting 2 players in the early first to late first, early second. There's no other team going like that. That's kind of my point behind
there's the Falcons.
I mean, that's
Bijan and where Drake London is going.
Drake London's going early third. You're right, but again, that's another offense I'm not as interested in. So
What?
I think my argument behind both the teams that we're projecting is it's huge projections that have the first round talent. First round for me, I'm not as interested, especially in late first round, early second. I'm not interested in taking big swings as much as I want to make sure I get a good, safe floor on one of my guys. So if I take Garrett Wilson, I want to make sure I'm grabbing somebody who's got a very, very high floor, even if it's not a high ceiling.
Yeah, and it's like you're looking at the Jets depth chart for wide receiver, and to me, I'm still honestly expecting Allen Lazard to be a thing at some point, just off of him and Rodgers together. So I don't know. The target share should be there, but it's
I
really
think
going to be interesting to see how it shakes down.
Yeah, I think if Garrett Wilson is where he needs to be, he's going to get all the targets he can handle from Aaron Rodgers. It is as long as Aaron Rodgers can stay on the field, and that's an if with any man. It's an if with Christian McCaffrey.
yeah.
It's an if with Saquon Barkley. Like, we're playing that game. So you also can't draft scared. You want to have all the facts. That's what we try to do. That's why we sit down and put this together for y'all, help you make an opinion. But I think the second round's interesting because I'm with you. I don't feel great about the second round receivers right now because I think wild like Garrett Wilson, I think there's a higher ceiling this year as opposed to Puka Nacua. Because I think Puka is going to be good, but it's an offense I can see being a little bit more balanced with healthy Cooper Kupp, bringing his value down a little bit. I look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and that is a lot to bank on, wide receiver in the second round as a rookie. And
Yes.
there's only been 8 rookies that have. So here's a stat as I mumble along. So since 2011, 8 rookies have gone inside the top 6. And so we got Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, 4 and 6 in the NFL draft. Okay. Those who played at least 12 games, they did average 14.4 points per game. So there is enough of a floor with these guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. to believe in them. But I think it's a little bit to your point, Steve, where you're like, hey, I'm going to let someone else figure that out with Garrett Wilson. I'm kind of thinking like, man, it's now or never. Like if Aaron Rodgers is just playing decent football for a year and he can't produce a top 10 season, then I don't know whatever. Like if it's ever going to happen for Garrett Wilson.
It's
Well, so like
Kyle Pitts.
if we look at the draft, the players as draft prospects, Marvin Harrison Jr. has a higher draft prospect and a higher draft grade than Garrett Wilson. So if we want to draft just based off that and target share, you can make the argument Marvin Harrison Jr. should be going where he's going, right?
And people
But
you could say that you think Kyler Murray is going to have a better season than Aaron Rodgers.
So I would say that we're drafting it that way. I would also argue, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. is being drafted as if he's going to perform like Puka did last season. That's what we're drafting him as.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, again, I actually think Marvin Harrison Jr., he's a player I love as a prospect. I love him as a player, and the talent he has should get him as a second round receiver. But I just don't know if he's going to perform that way right off the bat. And I think a lot of people are going to regret that pick until about week 3 or 4. I do think he'll come on, and I think he'll come on strong. But I think for 3 or 4 weeks, he's going to have rookie struggles.
We'll see. I imagine him blow up the first week and then not do anything for another month. That's one thing that I literally could see.
The thing he has going for him is his route running is elite.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has been making the Malik Neighbors comparison, showing all his rookie training camp stuff. And you're not seeing much coming off of Marvin Harrison Jr. But then you go watch his tape. It's just because he's burning those cornerbacks by 5 or 10 yards. Like, you don't get highlight plays when you're so open. The quarterback just
you're too open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is. I love it. The conversation back and forth, because I think that I'm looking at the round 2 wide receivers, and I can see why there's such a run on running backs before the wide receivers come back in. But there is a track record again of the 8 rookies who have gone inside the top 6 since 2011 that have played at least 12 games at the position. And we're talking the NFL draft wide receivers. You've had Jamar Chase finish 18 points per game, Julio Jones 15.7, Jalen Waddle 15.5, AJ Green 14.5. Those are solid numbers for rookies, but are they going to be good enough there in the second round We shall see. All right, that's enough on the elite players. You know who they are, what they're going to do. Let's start doing our draft or pass round by round breakdown. Whether you've done your draft, maybe you can do a little grading of yourself, or you're getting ready, because I know Labor Day is going to be a huge draft weekend. It is for a lot of people, whether you're doing your second or third draft, or it's your time that you can actually get away and get with everyone. Let's give you the players you need to know. And we'll start in the third round, because we just talked about some of the elite names in the first couple rounds. Steve, you're coming out there round 3, and you're looking at all the names that have been off the board. What are you starting to look at as your favorite values when you get to the third round?
So my favorite values coming into the third round are actually a few more running backs. And I see these guys that I feel like should go in the second round with all those other running backs, but they're just being pushed down a little bit. And that's James Cook and Devon Achane. I think these two players, Devon Achane, we were drafting the second round not too long ago, and we've seen him kind of fall off into the third. And James Cook, I just think that in Buffalo, you have Dalton Kincaid, a host of other receivers that we're not sure which one is going to be great, but we know James Cook's probably going to get a few more dump offs, and he's their main back. They didn't bring any competition in for him. So for me, I love Cook and I love Achane. I think you have high upside with those players. And if you missed out on one of those round 2 running backs, the Derrick Henrys and stuff, that's where you can grab one of those guys. And I still think you should feel really confident with those picks. So, if you started your draft with AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson, if you can grab a Cook and or an Achane, you should be feeling pretty good.
Is there anybody that you don't like too early for someone, or you're not going to jump on? Because it's kind of when people start reaching for Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta.
So I don't mind the tight ends here, but the quarterbacks have moved too far up. Now we're seeing Mahomes and Allen go in that third round, and you and I, well, all of us on this podcast have talked about this is the year to wait on quarterbacks, right? So Mahomes and Allen going off the board when you still have players like Laporta, like Travis Kelce, like Achane, like Cook still on the board. I think you're missing out. You could even take an Olave if you started off with, Derrick Henry and CMC, take an Olave. Don't end up with a quarterback there. So those are all the players in that range. I don't mind, but I don't want to take the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks I don't think should be going until the 4th or 5th round.
Yeah,
I agree.
If you want one of those big time guys, you're going to have to grab them early, and we'll see what kind of advantage that can give you this season. So you come out of round 3, and then you're eyeing round 4, and some really interesting names. And Aaron, we're going to have some decisions on a lot of 49ers, specifically Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk right now, still 4th round ADP, of course, using Fantasy Pros ADP. I think Brandon Ayuk is probably going to start slipping out of that round. You have a couple of Buccaneers and Mike Evans and Rachaad White in there. You have your Cooper Kupp. You look at the 4th round, who are some guys you'd like to get at that point in time?
Yeah, in the 4th round, I definitely like Mike Evans. Cooper Kupp, I still think is a steal there. He's healthy. He's still Cooper Kupp. Rachaad White, I would draft him there, but I'm biased because he helped me win a championship last year. So the 4th round has a lot, like you said. It's like Deebo. I love Deebo there. It's like let's see who else I can find that would be a good pick.
Look at Deebo, 16.2 points per game. Maybe not as consistent at times. Had more spike weeks than consistency, but could be in for a little bigger role early in the season. The Brandon Ayuk stuff still hasn't broken like CeeDee Lamb did, where he got the bag, and now we can go back in on CeeDee Lamb and see his ADP skyrocket. And I think we could see Deebo get a few more touches this season in the backfield, just so they make sure they don't have what could be potentially 3 straight at this point, like 300 touch seasons for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, definitely. And one other name, and it's kind of he's snuck up in some of the drafts, is Alvin Kamara's kind of gone up on some boards and kind of fallen on some boards. It is interesting to see. That is one other name that you may see or may not.
Well, that's perfect segue into the 5th round. So you go into that 5th round, and Alvin Kamara is going to be one of those players at the turn. And I think Alvin Kamara, when you look at what he did last season, he had 3 games where he hit 20-plus points in PPR. But late in the season, week 16 and 17, he averages 7 points per game. So he hurt you at the very end, but he's still a constant in that offense. And Derek Carr is good enough. We can feed someone like Chris Olave, which we talked about. And speaking of dump offs, we know it's going to be dump off city. So I think Alvin Kamara, if you want to get your RB2 out of the way, if you went running back early, round 5, you're feeling good. If you're starting to take a bite out of the apple after maybe going wide receiver, tight end early, I think at least you're getting yourself a solid floor there. And then I'm all about the receivers. I look at, DK Metcalf, who averaged 19.1 points per game. I think this is one where if you get him in the 5th round, even the end of the 4th round going into the 5th round, he is still the undisputed number 1 target in Seattle. Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, I think, are still going to be kind of going back and forth, sharing some stuff. But Geno Smith did talk in the offseason. He wants to unlock DK Metcalf. He wants, to put DK Metcalf in that conversation with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. So I think he's going to be the focal point of the offense. If you're telling me in the 5th round that I could be drafting someone that we know has elite traits and he could be sliding in as my wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 at that point in time, sign me up all day for that. So I love DK Metcalf right there. And then a dude that just hasn't gone up as much as we're expecting. He might be gone earlier in our league, but Jalen Waddle's still sitting there. Like he's like, yes. Like there's nothing. You have the Dolphins. You have Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle. They're gonna throw the football. They're the 2 pass game targets there. Like he has 90+ reception upside. Like let's go.
He flies under the radar, man.
My favorite thing about Jalen Waddle is last season, Hurt finished as wide receiver 20. 2 seasons ago with Tyreek Hill, finished as wide receiver 8. We're drafting him as wide receiver 21. We're drafting him at his floor. So even if you split the difference, I have him as wide receiver 12, right? Like he's on my board as wide receiver 12. So, I mean, if you can get him there, do it all day. I mean, take him around earlier. Take him in the 3rd or in the 4th and laugh at your league mates when you're winning the championship because
we got to be ready. Steve, 4th round Waddle or 3rd round? He might even take him in the 3rd round.
Probably 3rd round.
I think I go 3rd.
Well, if we do the math, you have your 10 keepers. So the 3rd round in our league would be the 4th round. So I would take him in the 3rd round because 10 players are already off the board before we even get the 1st round pick. So
yeah, and these are the little things that all leagues a little bit different right now. We're working just 10-team PPR draft, Fantasy Pros ADP as of August 26th. And we know these things are going to change throughout the week, especially as mentioned, CeeDee Lamb, other news that might come in, whether Brandon Ayuk is traded or signs an extension or shows up. And the one under the radar thing, I forgot to mention it, why I'm back on board with Ja'Marr Chase is he came back to practice.
Yep.
He did the quiet hold in, didn't make a lot of noise, but he's back to practice, and he realizes that the Bengals ultimately are still a cheap organization. They already gave Joe Burrow a whole bunch of money, and he's not going to get an extension right now. So he's going to show up, play, make sure he gets his money. And that's why I'm back on board with Ja'Marr Chase there at the end of the 1st round. All right, we head to round 6. Back to you, Steve. What do you like? Midpoint of the draft, you start making a little tougher decisions.
This is actually my favorite round for a few reasons. I love grabbing my tight end here. I love getting one of Kincaid or Kittle. I think Kincaid has top tight end potential, like tight end 1 potential. I do see him finishing as tight end 3 to 4. You're getting him as tight end 5. I love it. I also love Kittle here because I think Kittle has a huge opportunity. We know when Ayuk hasn't played or Deebo Samuel's been out, when they're missing one of those, Kittle's becomes the number 2 option on that offense. We don't know what's going on with Brandon Ayuk right now. Deebo misses games usually, just the way he plays. So I think Kittle is a great pick here. I love getting him as my tight end, especially going off the board as tight end 6. Stoked. And then my favorite sleeper pick is George Pickens here. George Pickens is the number one target on an offense that we don't think will be great, but we know he's going to get a lot of, if not all of the targets. They got rid of Deontay Johnson this offseason. All they have is Jalen Warren and Najee Harris and maybe Pat Freiermuth. I think Pickens has the potential to get a ton of targets and upside. And the reason he got faded, in my opinion, was because the Ayuk trade. That seems like it's died. Pickens should be going up a little bit higher. I mean, he's finished. We did this or we did blind resume last week. Pickens and Garrett Wilson had the exact same points per game the last 2 years, and they're both coming into their third season with potential. Now, granted, Aaron Rodgers is a much better quarterback than Justin Fields.
I think what matches up though for Pickens to his value versus a quarterback play. I think we can maybe look at Courtland Sutton's game log last year with the Broncos and kind of get a sense of Russell Wilson really just honed in on one target because Courtland Sutton was really the only option in the Broncos passing game last year. So I think you can make some correlations there. And I just wondered the consistency they're going to find. But if you're saying you're getting a wide receiver one in terms of target share in an offense in the 6th round, he'll probably be your wide receiver 3 at that point in time with how things have played out. I'm with you on the value for Pickens.
Yeah, so that's why I love getting him there because I'm not having to draft him as my wide receiver 1, and he has wide receiver 2 upside. I don't think he has wide receiver 1 upside, but I do think worst case scenario we could actually see Pickens end up as wide receiver 12 to 16, 17. I love getting that value there. So I think that's his ceiling, but I think his floor when you're drafting him this late, it's your wide receiver 3. You're drafting him probably as your 27th, 28th wide receiver off the board. And then those other pass catchers, Kittle and Kincaid. I think this is a great round to grab a tight end as well. If you didn't grab one of Laporta, McBride, Mark Andrews, Kelsey, grab Kincaid or Kittle here and be happy.
Yeah, I'm with you on the value there. I like attacking, especially Dalton Kincaid. He's one of my favorite players this season. Big man crush on him there, and value-wise too. You compare him versus you see people start kind of not reaching at quarterback, but Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson can go off the board. You have some of the veteran players, and one of our favorite, James Conner. That's kind of the area that if you want a piece of him, you're going at. But I think picking out Pickens was great right there. We head into round 7, and maybe in the 7th round, you can actually get the best bang for your buck at the tight end position, even though, when you got Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, if you're able to wait and people play the rankings, I don't know how this guy is still there at this point in time, but you're looking at some also wide receivers too. And then maybe a round where you're comfortable attacking the quarterback position, but you got to look at a dude that's sitting there in the 7th round, Aaron, Evan Ingram.
Oh, yeah.
7th round.
If he's there in the 7th round.
Bigger piece of that passing game in terms of the guy that Trevor Lawrence can trust this season.
Oh, I'm buying if he's there. Absolutely. I was like, red zone looks like Evan Ingram targets all day. So I was like, I'm definitely buying Evan Ingram if he's in the 7th round. There's no doubt.
Tied in
2 last year.
13.5 points per game. And I think he can build off that just because they're working in new pieces.
I do feel that way too, especially Christian Kirk. It seems like they don't want to push him too hard coming back from injury. A little bit more focus on Evan. Evan's doing good, so it's like, yeah, he's gonna get peppered all day.
Yeah, I think that's a home run there. In the 7th round, an interesting one to me. I'm gonna get your thoughts, Aaron, on it. T. Higgins sitting there. So T. Higgins was the one that was hurt the most last year by Joe Burrow being out because, of course, he's wide receiver 2 in the passing game. Regardless, he was battling some injury, but this was a player. You go back to 2023, 74 receptions on 109 targets, 7 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. And that was part of 3 straight seasons where Higgins saw 100 plus targets. How do you feel about Higgins? Because in the 7th round, we're talking your wide receiver 3, maybe even a dude you could be flexing
flex
at that point.
Yeah, and coming in, it's kind of the same talk with like Garrett Wilson not having a quarterback and not doing well. Now there's a quarterback, Joe Burrow's there, T. Higgins is going to get his targets. So as long as Joe's healthy, and it looks to be the case, so it's like T. Higgins, I would draft him there, especially if you could put him in the flex. You already have your receivers. So
Yeah, and then the 7th round too, where I might be comfortable taking a shot, because that's where we're seeing kind of Jordan Love settle right now. And I know he's been your guy when we've gone through the draft process of the players that we each kind of put our stamp on, the man crush of the season. That's where you're starting to see Jordan Love go. And at that point in time, you've been able to put your starting running back, tight end, and some wide receivers in there. Is this when you'd be ready to pull the trigger?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Jordan Love, especially being one of my guys, it's like I would. There is another quarterback too, and he may fall depending on draft, but Dak Prescott's another one. He's going to throw touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, and they're going to throw the ball. So it's like those two, if they're there, it's like I'm more than happy to take either one.
You could be, getting an interesting stack. Able to get CeeDee Lamb in the first round if you have the top 3 picks now. Build your team and put him with Dak Prescott, and you're looking at someone that you're constantly feeling good, like pushing maybe QB6 or better finish every single week, throwing a CeeDee Lamb. That's a sneaky stack that's not going to cost you a lot.
No,
in fantasy.
No, not getting
from
him
the
there.
Quarterback paying up.
Right.
It costs you a lot because you have to have CeeDee Lamb, but
that was the stack I ended up going with in that league where CD fell to the 10th pick. I was like, I'm going to grab Dak here and make that stack happen.
Oh yeah, that's
again,
genius.
Fantasy football, real life playoff games don't matter. This is fantasy football regular season.
I only have to play till week 17, and that's to get to the championship.
Get that championship, and then we don't have to worry about the Cowboys not doing anything in the postseason. All right, we go to the 8th round, and this is we all have these guys that we gravitate to in fantasy, and this has been a guy I've talked about a ton, and I don't know, am I missing something? Are we overvaluing rookie quarterback play? But then I took a step back and looked at his game log the last few years with quarterback play being up and down in Washington, and I'm wondering why Terry McLaurin has 8th round ADP right now. Like, this is one that makes sense. It's kind of like how you feel about Jalen Waddle, right? Steve, you're like, dude, this is easy guy that could be finishing, top 12 wide receiver. And I'm looking at Terry McLaurin. The last 4 years, he's averaged 80 receptions on 130 targets per year, gone over 1,000 yards. Now, only had 4 touchdowns last year. But I got a Heisman Trophy quarterback that can make all the throws with athleticism. I have a pass game that is even a bigger question mark than the pass game we're talking about behind George Pickens. There's no tight end that's stepping up. There's been Sonnet from Kansas State they just traded Jahan Dotson. Everyone was penciling him in to be something this season, and they traded him to a division rival in Philadelphia. So you have Damari Brown, Luke McCaffrey, a rookie out of Rice. He ain't Christian, he's Luke. And I'm sitting there going, how is this dude who's 28 years old going in the 8th round with a better quarterback, unbelievable target share, and a track record of consistency regardless? So Terry McLaurin, he is the dude that I will draft around before.
Dude, I have him as like 56 or 57 on my rankings. So the fact that he's going,
brought that up.
Yeah, the fact that he's going in the 8th round, I was like, he's in the 70s. I have him. He's the same thing as I have as Jalen Waddle, 20 picks, because it doesn't add up to me, right? Like, I feel the exact same way about Jalen Waddle as I do Terry McLaurin. It doesn't make sense. And Jaden Daniels is being drafted as a top 10 quarterback. He's got to throw to someone. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I was going to say, Terry went considerably higher in the draft ad yesterday. So
that's what I think.
If he's there, and there are people sleeping on him. Don't get me wrong, but it's like he is rising.
Don't like he'd be slipping. Don't be afraid to take him in the 6th round.
Well, and the people watching this, I think, and I'm just as guilty of this, so I can't say much. Sometimes we get stuck on the rankings that we're looking at on the computer when we're drafting. if you see Terry McLaurin is supposed to go 20 picks from now, but you know and
You're
you
up.
believe he's going to be good, and you're not sure if he's going to come, just grab him.
Yeah.
I've done that so many times with Jalen Waddle. Like Yahoo has him ranked, I think, 48th, and then I'll be up at 35, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm taking Jalen Waddle here because I'm not going to wait 13 picks to take him.
That is
Yeah.
something I've kind of struggled to get across because I've talked a lot about I've changed my view, and I'm looking at rounds and how people are drafting to value my team, and I've kind of struggled to get that across to people because I get like a blank stare sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? And it's a point you just made, Steve. My point is, don't get caught up on rankings. Like, use them to just know who's there. But the point of this podcast, the point of all the work the fantasy football industry does, it's to get you to know players are more than that ranking. And Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin are that to me.
Yeah.
Like,
don't be a ranking slave. Don't.
And that's what what I really wanted to do with this episode too, is put that final stamp on it.
Yeah.
What we've been talking for fantasy football draft season, the way I'm changing stuff. Like, I haven't ranked anyone this fantasy football season. Like, I don't have a top 10. I don't have, these are my guys. Like, I have players I like, but I've done a lot more just based on ADP because the ADP comes off rankings.
Right.
So the way people are drafting is off rankings, and I'd rather get a sense of where players are going to go so I can attack them before other people. And so while we're talking about draft or pass, if you hear these names, don't be scared to get them around earlier. Don't say, oh, I have to wait to the 5th round.
Yeah.
Or I have to wait to the 7th round to get Evan Ingram. The reason we're talking about these players is we believe they're going to be good regardless. So if they're there, pounce on them. But jot these names down as if you get to the 4th round, like, I don't know what to do. Oh, they say this guy's a great value in the 5th round. Take him in the 4th round. It's okay.
So I'm gonna give a shout out to a different company here, but we're not sponsored by them. But RotoWire offers an app on your phone for $7.99, and you can put in the consensus sleeper rankings, or you can use. They have a bunch of apps that they kind of defer to as their rankings for average draft position. So they do 2 quarterback, PPR, just PPR, 12 team, whatever. You put that in there, it'll produce what it thinks is the ADP for all those things, and then I go in there and adjust them based off of how I feel about players, and then I rank off of I draft off of that. So I'm using ADP, but I'm also moving the players based off of
using your own
right,
your own input, your own eyes.
Right. So I'm going, okay, and I can see it. So it's a way to start ranking your own players without having to be a fantasy
well,
expert.
Also, you don't feel this burden of I have to sit down and write 50 names down.
Exactly. So if you're about to do a live right, if you're about to do a live draft, you can put in all of your settings into your phone. You can it'll
everything.
All the keepers, you can put in everything. And then if you get into round 12 or 13, as you're drafting, you're taking these players and you're putting them on everybody else's team. If you get to around 12 or 13 and you're uncomfortable, they have a setting on there, and you can hit value, and it'll tell you who it believes based off of your settings the best pick would be there. So it's a great app for especially our inexperienced players to get a handle of this, and you can move your players around and then see their ADP and go, okay, I like him in this section, which is where he's going. I like him more than all these guys, so I'm going to move him up here.
Well, and I appreciate you guys going along for the ride with me this fantasy draft season, because I've done something. This is our first full fantasy draft season anyway on the fantasy football show, but I've gone down an entirely different road than I've spent so many years doing. Like, I have sat there and written down like, oh, I want 12 quarterbacks, 20 running backs, but we all have lives, and I still don't have time to do that all the time. But I wanted to say, all right, how do I use rankings, but then also factor in how people are drafting off rankings? And I think ADP is one of the many ways you can do that. And it's kind of like this last episode, I wanted to give y'all like one more chance at the names we really like regardless. Yeah, we're saying 7th, 8th round, but as Steve said, don't be scared to take them a little bit earlier, because these are going to be playmakers, and it's just a different way to look at it, to where it's easy to get lost in rankings as well, especially when you have one of those cheat sheets that has 300 names on it.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is trying to give you rounds. So think of it as like one round either way. So kind of 3-round buffer of these players that we're talking about. You're good around early, around later. In that round, it's going to be good value for your fantasy football team. All right, so a couple more too, and I think not breaking any news. I think this player over the next week, as we wrap up fantasy drafts, probably going to keep climbing, because you hit it, Steve. There's Rashee Rice. Nothing's coming down the pipeline in terms of penalties right now. This looks definitely like an Alvin Kamara situation where he's going to miss games next year and not this year. Hollywood Brown's hurt. That was a serious injury, dislocated his clavicle. It's going to cost him early in the season. Rashee Rice, down the end of last season in the playoffs, Mahomes showed he's a trusted option. You talk about it, and we've done the series. And if you missed it, you can check us out, of course, on the Twitter at 3Dudes Fantasy Football. Also on the Instagram, 3Dudes Fantasy Football. And, Steve, you put your top 2 targets, pass catchers for each team, and we posted them. And now it's Rice and Kelce.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love where Rice is going. I just don't think that's where he'll fit. Like in a week,
yeah,
you're gonna have to draft him in the 4th or 5th round, and that's where he should go.
I think he's gonna jump 4 rounds.
I do.
By the weekend.
I do. I really think we're about to see it.
He went in the 9th in a 12-man yesterday. So
Aaron, why did you not take him in the 9th?
I was literally going to take him.
You should have taken him in the 8th.
I know I wanted to.
I told
you. You guys are sleeping on him, and then it's like,
and then you missed it, Aaron. You missed it.
See, and that's what we talk about, right? Like Aaron
it's
could have
not grabbing him.
Yep.
Well, I'll even say this, because it completely depends on the league. Dak Prescott didn't get drafted till like the 14th or 15th round because they hate Cowboys. This league hates the Cowboys. So that's what happened. And I'm like, whoever drafted him, I don't remember who it was. I was like, they got a good quarterback there.
Yeah, and these are things like every draft is that people are just going to draft because they love the Dolphins, because they love the Jaguars. They're going to draft because they think, hey, it's fantasy football. It's probably just like real football. I need a quarterback. I'm going to take one in the 1st and 2nd round. And we understand it, but we're just trying to give you the base to work with and get comfortable and write some names down for your draft. And with that, the 8th round wide receiver value, absolutely love it. And I'm with you. I'll take Rashee Rice, Terry McLaurin, maybe even the 6th and 7th round out there. Because it's what we're discussing is building your team out. Also think about that, not just, I'm drafting wide receiver 17, wide receiver 23. What are you playing? You have to start 3 wide receivers, start 2 wide receivers. So how does that look like on your team versus the ranking? So we get into the 9th round.
Yep.
And what do you like about round 9?
Round 9 is a little bit harder, right? So this is where you start to get into the how do I feel about my team? Now, hopefully the last 8 rounds you've listened to us and you feel great about your team, and now we're feeling in depth. So in this round, what I either like to do is there's only one receiver in this round that I'm interested in, and that's Deontay Johnson. Again, high pass catcher on a bad offense. So I don't project that he'll be great, but if I am trying to get another safe wide receiver, because maybe I went running back heavy, or you went against our options, you went running back, quarterback, tight end. Now you're looking for receivers. Deontay Johnson should have a good season. I'm not projecting great season, but a good season.
Well, you talk about showing something, and Deontay Johnson for playing with old Ben Roethlisberger, Kenny Pickett, now Bryce Young, who's hoping to be a serviceable quarterback. This is a guy in his career. 1 year he did finish as wide receiver 8.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has the potential, which is why I would draft him here. But that's the only reason. Like, we don't love Carolina's offense, but I have 2 Carolina Panthers in this round. So Deontay Johnson, and then I have 3 running backs. So at this point, Brian Robinson Jr., I think, has a high potential, great running back. I love getting him here. And then my other 2 running backs are injured, and that's Nick Chubb and Jonathan Brooks. Now, both of these guys I'm interested in taking for the same reason. Brian Robinson, I want to take if my running backs are good and I'm just trying to have a little bit of depth. If I took probably 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds. Chubb and Brooks, on the other hand, or if I went 0 RB, because then I've probably gone into 4th or 5th round and grabbed whatever running backs I could. It might be, Alvin Kamara and Ken Walker or some strategy along those lines. I want to grab Brooks and Chubb here so that I can stash them on my bench. And when they come back, I have the potential to have a great running back. They might not be great, but I want that potential.
Yeah, it's worth the risk.
And that's all I'm doing here. So Deontay, I'm taking if I'm just trying to get a good receiver. Brian Robinson, I think, has potential to have good flex weeks for you. But Chubb and Brooks, the talent is there. Chubb coming off that injury, we already know he's going to sit at least 4 weeks. I have no clue how he's going to come back, but I'm willing to take him here for a chance because we're so late. And I feel the same thing about Brooks. He has high potential. He did get hurt in college. He hasn't practiced, so even if he comes back after the 2 weeks he's injured, I don't think we see him get back into the swing until week 6 to 8. But I'm sitting on those guys, and both those guys can go on my IR spot.
I like that with looking at the second half of the season upside. And I want to throw this question out to you because we'll get to the 10th round in a second, and that's where I had this name written down. Was Jerome Ford. So is this even an area where now that it's official, Ford's going to go up?
Yeah.
But how do you feel about a guy that for the first 4 weeks is probably going to be RB1 in that offense? If he's there in 9th round, would you maybe do that? Like Chubb Ford back to back?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if I can grab both of them, I'm happier because the Browns offense is a run first offense, right? We always talk about the Dolphins and the Rams and the 49ers. The Browns are the same. They like to run, and Ford was a top performer last season when Chubb went down. So I would love to do that. I might even go 8-9, grab Ford in the 8th and in the 9th round, grab Chubb. And then I have that Browns backfield.
Yeah. Ford did good. Even with Kareem Hunt there. Right. So it's like Kareem Hunt did take a little bit away, but he was still the RB1 there. So.
And then to kind of piggyback off of what JJ said here, you could always take Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks too. Chuba Hubbard will be the starting running back for Carolina for a little bit. You're not going to have to waste a lot of draft capital on him, So that's another option.
Yeah, that's
not as interesting as Ford and Chubb, but I could do it.
Yeah, it's kind of you're balancing maybe just true handcuffs, potentially of Blake Corum down those lines, and then you have the coin flip of a Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears versus those are two backfields. That at least for 4 weeks in Cleveland, you're getting Jerome Ford, and you can start him as an RB2.
100%.
And kind of same thing with Chuba Hubbard. He'll probably get the majority of the snaps, and then as you said, Brooks will work in late, so you can work your way into having it backed up, and both those teams will getting a starter, a guy that you can at least play for the first few weeks of the season. All right, it goes into round 10, and this is the last round that we're going to dive into. Then we're just going to go straight sleeper, late round value pick. So you get into that 10th round, Aaron, and for me, this is when I'm looking at those quarterbacks. And if I've waited, and we talked about, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes going potentially 2nd, 3rd round, Jordan Love in the 7th round. Now you're getting into, all right, QB 10 or later, but guys that we really do like. I'm looking at quarterback, but what are you thinking at this point in your draft? And of course, it depends on if you got one of those guys early or you waited.
Well, yeah, it really depends on where you're at. It's like for quarterbacks, you might be able to find Brock Purdy possibly in the 10th round. He might have already gone, but there is someone that you can find possibly there. But I do like 2 receivers here. It's Christian Watson, and it's mostly off of upside. He's been down, for a while, but it's the Green Bay offense that there's another one too on upside that maybe JJ's like, and it, the Bills have been up and down in the preseason with their offense kind of getting things together. It's like, but I like Keon Coleman, and there's one other receiver too. And I'm just right now in the 10th round, I'm probably picking some upside. I've seen Lad McConkey kind of go. I'm interested in him a little bit. He may go later. It really depends because who's going to catch the ball in that offense? How is the quarterback going to be? But he is probably going to turn out to be the go-to. So there is a few there, and I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that on the 10th round.
Well, this is when Lad McConkey should have been drafted all along. I know if you were drafting early, there are some rankings where he was going 5th, 6th round because we're just assuming, oh, they drafted a wide receiver. They don't have any wide receivers. It's going to be this rookie out of Georgia who's a really good route runner, has good metrics, has performed when he's on the field. But there's also some concerning things to me in the preseason, the fact that he wasn't on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. So he is a true wide receiver 3 slot guy right now. So if I'm taking a chance on him, this is where I'd want to start putting my bench together with upside. And I said, all right, could this guy be maybe a flex play here or there if we see him develop chemistry with Justin Herbert? That's when I'd like to take the chance. I'm with you on McConkey. I'm glad you brought him up because he has gone, the opposite direction from being this dude that we did talk about him as like 5th, 6th round. Like, well, this is crazy. It's all right. 10th round or later is with him. And, Keon Coleman, there's so many rookies. Like, we're putting our faith in a lot of rookie wide receivers this year, but you can make the case why. Marvin Harrison Jr., elite talent, number 1 target with a quarterback that is a playoff quarterback. And guess what? You can say the same thing. As much as you want to joke about Daniel Jones, it's Malik Neighbors, wide receiver 1, with a quarterback that's taken a team to the NFL postseason and won a game. And then, Keon Coleman, I look at it the same way. I'm like, you get Josh Allen, Mr. Rise All Tides, and an offense that outside of Dalton Kincaid, you have, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, but I think those guys are so much more role players as opposed to being someone that can soak up a big time target share in that offense. And that's why I think the rookies are fascinating. And even Roma Dunze at this point in time, I think he's kind of an afterthought, but this is when you want to start banking on upside because
especially in oh yeah, absolutely. But those
they
keeper
didn't
leagues,
draft they didn't draft Roma Dunze 9th overall to not give him some opportunities this year.
But Roma Dunze has this connection with Caleb Williams. Like, every time there's a broken play, Caleb is looking for Rome.
Yep.
Like, it's one of those things where he has the potential to be his number 1 target because they have a connection already.
And I think he'll get on the field because I know they signed Gerald Everett, and Cole Kmet is still there, and they're trying to maybe work in some more 2 wide receiver sets, but this wasn't just a draft for the future because that's the future. When you gave Caleb Williams his wide receiver, just like the Bengals do with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. But Keenan Allen, I think he's not going to be playing 100% of the snaps every week. I expect him to be solid, but we saw him miss time last year. I think he's a player you want to manage because the Bears think they can be successful this year and be in contention in the second half of the season. And of those guys, Roma Dunze, yes, like that's bet on the upside with him in that offense. You make a good point. Like, with the flashy plays we've seen in the preseason, it's Caleb Williams somehow finding Roma Dunze on the field.
Yeah, I mean, even he's had 2 different plays where Rome was just barely out of bounds or just like missed the catch by 3 feet. Both of them in the back of the end zone. So he clearly is who he's looking for, and they have a connection when a play breaks down.
So there's a lot of upside in these rounds. Young wide receivers that were drafted. I went to the 9th overall pick for Roma Dunze. The fact that Keon Coleman was the first pick of the draft for the Bills. It was the 2nd round, but they traded back and took Keon Coleman. And then also, I'll get back to it. This is the rounds that if you waited on quarterbacks, right, you have to go now. You have to be in attack mode. And I discussed it a little bit last time. I would be excited to get one of those steady quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, and then come right back and get Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
Like, this is the time. If you wait, you got to attack then.
Well, and like we said last time, I prefer Jaden Daniels just because of that rushing, but Caleb Williams has looked like the number one pick these last few preseason games. So I don't think you can miss with either of them.
No.
But I do agree with you. I think you have to take a safe quarterback as well. A quarterback you know is going to get you fantasy points because those rookies are going to go up and down.
They're still there.
Yep.
That round.
All right.
Yep.
So after the 10th round, and we talked about it, you're going your quarterbacks, you're going high upside, but then it's kind of all bets are off. Like, I do not have great 12th, 13th, 14th round plans straight. I don't. I got a solid 10 and 11. Like, I know what I'm doing. If I'm waiting on quarterbacks, 10th, 11th round, I'm trying to get those combos. Then after that, it's handcuff season. It's does anyone sprain an ankle season over the next 2 weeks? And maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to start this guy as my flex week 1 because we know this player out. But in the late rounds, who are some names that you guys see on the board and you're comfortable saying, hey, this is going to be on my bench because maybe there could be some value there or upside?
I got one.
Yeah,
no, go ahead. If you
no, you go ahead first, sir.
So, let's see here. Where is he? He just scrolled off my page. So the wide receiver 2 for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay. Jakobi Meyers?
Jakobi Meyers is one that I late dart that I'm going to throw. He had a fairly successful season last year. I think he had 8 touchdowns. I could be wrong. I know it was more than I expected looking at his stats. He was solid. It's a passing game. We'll see where Brock Bowers fits in. But I throwing a dart there. Number 2 receiver on that team.
We're expecting a little bit more consistency with Gardner Minshew. And we saw Minshew early last season had a good connection with Josh Downs, a slot receiver, and I think Jakobi Meyers fills that role a little bit. Now he has come into that more outside profile, bigger body, but we've seen him produce PPR numbers throughout his career, and that's an established starter that you're getting in a late round. So I like that one a lot. What do you got, Steve?
Well, I have a few. The players that I've been picking the most of are Jalen Wright for the Dolphins, just because he has had an electric preseason. And if Achane or most, or if hey, that's our job. If Achane or Mostert go down, I think Wright has earned that RB3 role.
With what we saw last year, Mike McDaniel, like, he's going to get 2 guys featured, regardless. So that's your point of all it takes is one of those guys get banged up,
and we saw it last season, right? Achane was out for parts of the season, and Mostert had a carry, and then Mostert was out for the last part of the season, and Achane had a carry, and both of those guys are not every down backs, and that's why he does a rotation, right? So we want to get 2, and I think if you get Jalen Wright,
the third.
In one league I did, Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Wright, just said, I'm going to tie up that backfield and I'll figure it out.
Just hoard them all.
McDaniel. Did you get Jalen Waddle?
No, I did not. if I take Devon Achane,
just start the whole Dolphins team.
Yeah, no. If I get Achane, I don't want to grab Waddle or Hill, and if I grab Hill, I don't want to grab Waddle or Achane. I don't want to be too invested in one team. I want all of those players, but also Hill, Achane, and Waddle are going rounds 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? So I don't want to go Dolphin. The other person that I just don't think is getting talked about enough is Rico Dowdle. Like, we haven't talked about him enough. He's the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys. Like,
is he
though?
He's
probably.
I don't know. I could see
Zeke.
I don't know. Zeke's gonna be like Derrick Henry light, very light, super light, diet ranch dressing light.
But Rico Dowdle is going to pick 146. Like, you could just take him with your 14th round pick.
Yeah, that's a good. These are the picks. Like, if you're taking Rico Dowdle on the 4th, I'm with you. poking
Yeah,
fun. And it could be the same thing for Zeke in the 12th round.
Yeah.
You're going to get a couple playable weeks out of Zeke Elliott.
Oh yeah.
And so if he's just sitting there as an RB3 for you, fill in, yes, that's what we're talking about.
I have one more that I do love. I think you have the other two that I'll say, so I'll let you have them. But Jalen Polk for the New England Patriots. Jacoby Brissett got hurt in the last preseason game. Drake May and him have a connection. He has the potential to be, I don't want to say Puka Nacua, but he has potential to kind of have that Jalen Waddle season, his rookie season, 100+ catches, 1,000 yards.
That would be amazing.
That's his ceiling. I don't think he'll get there, but that's what his potential is for this rookie
I feel
season.
like I need to say something crazy. Like if Jalen Polk has 100 catches, 1,000 yards, like I'll eat a piece of paper or something. I feel like that's
it'll be recorded. So.
It'll be recorded. No. I don't think he'll get there, but I think he has the potential. And if I'm talking about taking him in the 13th, 14th round,
way to bury the lead. 100 catches, 1,000 yards.
That's his. I don't think he'll get there. I really think he's going to get 70 catches for 700 yards. But
I mean, pie in the sky. But
I think he's just going to be a check down merchant.
Drake May has enough time.
That's
why I'm saying he's a check down merchant, right? He's not going to average more than 9 to 10 yards a catch.
The rookie out of Washington played an offense, Michael Penix Jr., and saw how good they were at the end with the run that Washington went on in the CFP last year. I like it, guys. I like the names, and these are ones you don't want to overanalyze. Like you're filling your bench, you're looking maybe handcuffs, guys with some upside, and I'm also looking at starters. The Jacoby Myers one that you put out, Aaron. That's not going to excite people, but hey, if something happens and I need Jacoby Myers as a wide receiver 3 or flex, he's a starting wide receiver. Like he's going to be on the field and get targets. And that's the same way I feel about Courtland Sutton. I'm going back to the well with the Broncos. They gave him a little bit more guaranteed money to make him happy, so they were comfortable bringing him back. They released Tim Patrick today, so they're going to have a very young, unproven receiving core because people were expecting Tim Patrick to be a solid wide receiver 2 in the Broncos offense. He's gone. They don't have a tight end that they can rely on in the passing game. I'm cautiously optimistic with Bo Nix. I like his decisiveness, the fact that I don't care if they were against 2 or 3s, they scored points in the preseason, unlike, say, the Pittsburgh Steelers starters who did not score points in the preseason. Like, it was an efficient offense. He looked good, and Courtland Sutton in the 12th or 13th round is absolutely a player I'd love on my team just because if needed, you can slide him in there, and you should have a decent floor with this guy as your wide receiver 3. There. Some other players, Chargers backfield. I don't know who it's going to be because J.K. Dobbins has been practicing a lot more than I anticipated coming off the Achilles, but they're going to run the football, and they're going to run the football a lot. They don't have a lot of playmakers. We just talked about Ladd McConkey in this offense, and this is the wildest thing where Jim Harbaugh, when Justin Herbert walks onto the field, he says he hears angels singing. Like, it's wings come out of the back of Justin Herbert, but yet he's not going to be that guy because they just don't have the weapon. So they're going to run the football, do a lot of play action. And if I'm talking RB4, like, I will flip a coin, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, because one of those guys might carve out, a 60% share, and that could become RB2 playable because of how run heavy that offense is going to be. And then dude that's going to get suspended, I think maybe sooner rather than later, but Jordan Addison, talking about a first-round wide receiver last year in a Kevin O'Connell offense with everyone thinks Sam Darnold is going to be a thing. But if it's competent quarterback play, you're looking at a talent in Addison that's you can get late now because I think a lot of people have cooled off on the Vikings and him. Because I'd like him in that mold. And then someone I want to throw out there because I've had a good friend of mine talking him up a lot, and I know you've talked about him, Steve, is Jameson Williams in Detroit. And is it just one where there's just too many mouths to feed before you get to Jameson Williams being someone that you could put in your starting lineup.
You called me off on him because you made a point. You made my point against me, and I was like, I can't make an argument. And then JJ counters it with my argument. Like, I can't. So I cooled off on him because your point to me, and I truly believe this, you can't sustain, a quarterback can't sustain more than 2 targets or 2 viable fantasy targets. And we believe Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra will be those 2 targets. Jameson Williams, how am I supposed to know when to start him? He's going to have big weeks, but when? And how do I figure out when? I'm willing to take a chance on him, but your argument against me was so valid. I was like, yep, JJ's right. Off my sleeper list. So I kind of agree with you.
But this is also, if we're talking sleepers, like you just have to start taking some chances late in the draft on some of these guys. A couple, like I might lean more towards guys I know that are going to be playing, like a Cortland Sutton, Kobe Myers on my team. But then also, as you know, the Jalen Polk is a great example of if you're drafting him in, heck, probably 14th, 15th round at this point in time, like you have your starting lineup and you can wait on him a little bit. And so there's multiple ways you can attack, these
the other 2 players that we've talked about, very small. Blake Corum, JJ and I have loved him all season. If Kyron Williams goes down, he's going to slide right in. But the other player, which I really thought Aaron was going to bring him up, was Brian Thomas Jr.
Oh, yeah.
He's a first-round wide receiver. And
when I was doing my soliloquy of wide receivers, I forgot him. And then Xavier Worthy is another one.
Bring him up too.
Well, yes. Xavier Worthy's going in the 8th or 9th round, though. So that was outside of our.
More of my point was, like, we think all these guys are really good. And is this going to be like one of those exception to the norm seasons? Last year was CJ Stroud. Like, he comes in and you're like, rookies are just not supposed to do that. Like, those are few, it's Andrew Luck, ... CJ Stroud, ... Like, it's one of those seasons. And I'm wondering, because I love all these rookies. And how much I like them is kind of matching up with where they're going in fantasy drafts as well for their value. And is this one where all these guys could actually pan out in the first year and be impactful?
Well, just the first 3 rookie wide receivers that went off the board in this draft would have been the number 1 pick in any of the last 4 draft classes. They would have been the number 1 wide receiver off the board. So I don't disagree with your thought process, right? Like, I love these guys. And it was a deep wide receiver class. Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. Like, all these guys are special.
And I think that's a great point, because it's like, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like you have Marvin Harrison up here, but all the rookie wide receivers below him literally can be the top guy for rookie wide receivers. It's like all of them have the potential, that we talked about. They're big time still. So it's like, I'm willing to take that.
And we're seeing
chance
it
when you're drafting them.
I think last year, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers had solid seasons, but we were able to wait on the back end of that draft class a lot more than this year. Because I know there was one point in time where double-digit rounds, it was kind of, we saw, Addison, Flowers, Quentin Johnson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba.
Really, but the best receiver out of that class was Puka.
But Puka, and he didn't even get.
Yeah,
in the conversation.
That was a weak wide receiver class. I think this is the we're just going to see the complete opposite, where this is going to be a great wide receiver class.
And they're all fits that you can talk yourself into.
Yeah,
like they're all talents that even if you interchange them, if you're like, oh, I want to put Malik Neighbors in Chicago, Rome Odunze in New York, you have the same feeling. Like, oh, Rome Odunze, target. Number 1 target. And if you're like, oh, Xavier Worthy, you put him in Buffalo. Wow, we put Keon Coleman in Kansas City, and you'd be like, oh, here we go. Yeah. So, I think that solidifies your point, is the talent with these guys is so much more than just a scheme. And that's why I keep by myself coming back and I like where they match up. Xavier Worthy in the 9th round, Keon Coleman in the 10th round. Like, it all just makes sense value-wise from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, usually I don't draft rookie wide receivers, but this year I've been drafting more of them than I ever have.
I know. Right.
And that's a good time too, especially when you get to 10th round. And we just said, man, there's going to be Rome Odunze there. There's going to be Keon Coleman there. There's going to be Brian Thomas Jr. there. That's a great time to start taking that talent and the upside versus maybe even like the veterans I've talked about. Yeah, you could have a veteran player, but you could then absolutely hit on someone that takes off with one of these young players. It's Fantasy Football Manager Challenge. Got to take your chances, and guess what? You could probably even do both. Get a veteran, get a rookie, sandwich them when you get to 11th, 12th rounds in your fantasy football draft. But it is that time. And what time it is? Not mail time.
Full
but
time.
it is
It's blind resume time.
looking over the fence.
Yeah.
Blind resume time. Cats and boots, cats and boots, cats and boots.
Okay, so we're going to do this a little bit different. I want to get your guys' reactions because we are going to post these on YouTube. So hopefully you guys enjoy them when we do post them. So first, we're starting with our quarterbacks today. So we have quarterback A. He's 4,183 yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 389 rushing yards. His ADP is 28. So we've kind of talked about this. You guys all probably know who this is. Now, quarterback B, on the other hand, this was a surprise. 4,444 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 163 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. So quarterback A had no rushing touchdowns last season. ADP, 164. Okay, quarterback A, Patrick Mahomes, right? Surprise. Quarterback B, Baker Mayfield.
Ooh.
I literally looked at these two stats yesterday. It's insane.
Yeah. So when we're always talking about this, right? Where's your value?
Yeah.
You can get good value in those later rounds, and that's why we keep saying wait on quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield at the same.
That Baker
Mhm.
Mayfield just chugging along, has the playmakers on that offense. Evans, Godwin, White. Division is so even with the Falcons favorite. Like that's games that plenty of opportunity there for the Buccaneers. And Baker Mayfield, I'll be honest, he's not someone that I've talked about as a late round quarterback. But
Yeah,
maybe I need to.
He should be. Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is we have to remember quarterback A, Patrick Mahomes, has the potential to throw 55 touchdowns, and Baker Mayfield is kind of at a ceiling here. So you're taking Patrick Mahomes higher because and we've seen he is the best quarterback, and we've seen him produce at a fantasy level. I just wanted to kind of cool everybody off a little bit on quarterbacks, right? Every quarterback can have a season like this. All right. Running back A, 1,005 yards, 6 touchdowns, 55 receptions. I didn't put their yards in here because they're very close. Running back B, ADP for running back A is 81. Running back B, 935 yards, 9 touchdowns, 44 receptions. His ADP is 20. Okay. Running back A, Tony Pollard. Running back B, Isaiah Pacheco.
Ooh.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're overdrafting Isaiah Pacheco. I do think we see a bump, but Tony Pollard had a bad season and still outproduced fantasy.
Got over 1,000 yards. No, they're both last year. They were both similar roles in terms of RB1s with no pressure. The thing with Pacheco is I think he has a safe floor, but I don't know if it's a second round floor because if we're expecting Mahomes, I think Mahomes, the passing game, they're not going to be 15th in total offense like they were last year. So I think the passing game, I think we're going to see Mahomes back in the 30s for passing touchdowns. And then that takes off maybe some of the upside of Pacheco, and you hope, though, can he make it up and push 55, 60 catches? That'd be the thing.
Yeah, so this was actually one of those ones where I was like, I think we might be undervaluing Tony Pollard and overvaluing Isaiah Pacheco. I think Isaiah Pacheco should probably be a 3rd round running back.
He fits more of an RB2 profile.
Yeah.
Being drafted as your RB1.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's been hard.
Yeah, it has been hard. All right, next one, wide receivers. Wide receiver A, 103 receptions, 1,014 yards, 4 touchdowns, ADP 164. Wide receiver B, 72 catches, exact same yards, 1,014, 4 touchdowns, which was the craziest stat I could find. ADP 41. Wide receiver A, Adam Thielen.
Mm.
Wide receiver B, Jalen Waddle.
Oh,
I had to pick on myself here.
a little bit.
So wide receiver A with Adam Thielen, we saw, this is why I was kind of big. Deontay Johnson moved into this round for me. I see the targets there. I don't think he's going to have as big of a season as he did last season. I think Deontay Johnson takes some of those that role from him. Wide receiver B, obviously, Jalen Waddle did miss 3 games last season, and he walked out early on 2 of them. So he put up those numbers in 14, 13 games-ish. I do believe he'll have a better season. And this was his absolute floor. I think worst case scenario, unless he gets injured, this is what you could see as his floor. But, this is why I think Jalen Waddle is going ADP 41.
It's last year. I like this dynamic though, because it kind of reinforces the things that we just discussed throughout this episode on valuing players, attacking them in certain rounds, because you can, I think, take this stat line and put it on Deontay Johnson, and that would be fair, like his ceiling.
Yep.
Because I think Thielen, if he's on the field, the one thing, he's going to be Bryce Young safety blanket.
Yep.
And there's obviously that connection there, where Bryce Young last year knew Adam Thielen was going to be there to catch the football. So I think you could use this as like Deontay Johnson's ceiling. And if you're getting him, what were we talking about it in the 9th round?
9th round, yeah.
In that area, 8th, 9th round, you're getting a guy that's going to get potentially have 100 catches. That locks it in right there.
Yeah. And this is again why you're seeing Jalen Waddle go so low. So I picked on you guys last week. I needed to pick on myself, right? Like I can't have a man crush and then never pick on myself. That's not fair. Okay. Tight end A. These ones are hard. I'm not going to lie. The tight ends are the ones that get hard because there's not as many options. Tight end A, 53 receptions, 667 yards, 3 touchdowns, ADP of 62. Tight end B, 71 receptions, 761 yards, 5 touchdowns, ADP of 83.
It's about a 2-round difference.
2-round difference. Yeah, so we're getting closer. I can't keep these 100 round picks apart from each other. Tight end A is Kyle Pitts, and tight end B is Jake Ferguson. So, in my opinion, on this one, it's like I said, these are hard to do. I think Kyle Pitts and Jake Ferguson profile similarly, and we're projecting a massive uptick for Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts. One of them is not going to, in my opinion, get there. I think it's Kyle Pitts.
That's fair. Yeah.
Kirk Cousins is
because I don't think. So here's the thing: where with Kyle Pitts, is he? You believe he's number 2 in the passing tree?
I don't. I actually.
You have
like
to.
I have to move down to number 3 behind Bijan.
So this is one of the rare runs where you're accounting for a running back taking away from.
Yeah, so usually I count as your running backs as checkdowns, so you don't really account for targets, except for Alvin Kamara, who is he's just going to catch. But I actually have Bijan this season with 70 plus targets, and I can't say he's going to get 70 plus targets. And we have Drake London over 100, and then we're supposed to say what Kyle Pitts is supposed to get another 90. And everything I've heard out of training camp has been Kyle Pitts still looks slow, and his hips look a little weak. Drake London has been the guy Kirk Cousins is raving about. He's saying he looks amazing.
That makes sense. This kind of feels people are trying to force Kyle Pitts into something. Maybe a little bit, with Garrett Wilson, even though there's a little bit more to trust with Garrett Wilson there as Kyle Pitts. Yeah, Kyle Pitts had the 1,000-yard receiving season as a rookie, but the injuries just seem to be lingering. And the reports that you've talked about, that's what we've been talking about over the last year with Kyle Pitts. It doesn't look as exposed. It doesn't look like the guy they drafted in the top 10. So I appreciate that. And the one thing with Ferguson, like he's number 2.
Yeah.
For the Cowboys.
When we put those out, Jake Ferguson was my number 2 behind CeeDee Lamb. And you can even see it. He had 71 catches last season. So I think
Mhm.
Kyle Pitts is more explosive, even though I think he's still tight in his hips. He's still more explosive. And you can see that in his 667 yards and 53 catches, where Ferguson's averaging pretty much 10 yards a catch. But if CeeDee Lamb's taking the top off and Ferguson's just your check down, if I can get him, Ferguson's like that last guy I want to grab as a tight end, but I'm not interested in taking Kyle. I'm tired of Kyle Pitts. He's burned me
Yes.
3 years in a row. Like, do we want to do it a
He is
fourth time?
fetch. Stop
Yeah.
making fetch a thing.
I love it. And that's just more ways to get you thinking here on a Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show. So that's probably going to wrap up our pre-draft content for you as the NFL season kicks off September 5th, Thursday Night Football. It's going to be a good one. And I can't wait to finally put all this into fruition with our big drafts coming up on Labor Day. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be, I'm looking at the corner of my eyes at you two guys, because we have poured our hearts out. We have shared all of our draft strategies. So it's going to be really interesting when we get there and see how it plays out amongst us three and the rest of our league mates. So cannot wait for that. But if you haven't drafted yet, you can go back. We still got a ton of content for it that help you get ready for your draft. If you've drafted and you watched this episode, grade your draft. And maybe some of the players we talked about in the late rounds could be on waivers there for you to pick up and maybe even work with your bench before the season starts.
Send us your draft so we can grade them for you. That'd
We'll
be
grade
great.
your mock
Yeah.
drafts. And then you can mock us when we put our drafts up. That's how we'll go.
Yeah.
It works.
Mock us, and we'll talk about your drafts. Of course, you can follow us on the X at 3DudesFFS, the Instagram, and all this stuff is going to be pumping throughout the season. A lot more content coming your way, reaction, as we'll all be watching the games together. On Instagram, 3 Dudes Fantasy Football. The underscores are in there. We appreciate you checking us out on YouTube. Like and subscribe, please, and thank you as we continue the content for the entire season. But it's the final countdown. It is here.
Oh, thank goodness.
One of the best days of the year.
Christmas for
that
fantasy football. Is
Fantasy
here.
football draft. And I'm itching. I haven't done one yet. It is August 26th, and I have not done a fantasy football draft yet. So I am hungry. Take a bite of this apple next week with you guys. So I can't wait.
He's ready.
Bart Scott over here.
Can't wait. Not going to stop me like a nosebleed. So we will be breaking down all the post-draft stuff. And, you ready? Ranking season, start right around the corner, September 5th. But for Steven Masterson, Aaron Hernandez, I'm JJ Buck. Everybody, metal, peace, and love. Thank you so much for joining us on a 3 Dudes Fantasy.
Peace.
Later, y'all. Good luck.